Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar video. This is going to be some quick news updates, just two small pieces of news. The first one is just pretty simply, Avatar The Last Airbender is coming to Netflix in USA, in America, on May 15th. They have not had Avatar on Netflix for a while now. I don't know exactly how long. I know they had it at some point, but then it obviously went off. It actually might have been somewhere in the middle of the run of Korra, if I remember correctly. I seem to remember some sort of thing about it going off. But again, I may be completely misremembering that. Either way, the point is that in just a few weeks, America is going to have Avatar on Netflix, which will make it match up with a lot of other countries which currently have it. I think, I know specifically over here, Ireland, we have it on Netflix over here, which is, I think, the UK Netflix. And like a lot of other regions have it already. So obviously this is weird licensing stuff. I don't know exactly how it works. Obviously all the things with these streaming services is that they get it for a certain amount of time. So likely this probably, I was just about to say it probably means that Avatar will go away again. But I suppose given that the Netflix live action show is still in production, I can see them removing the animation show when the live action show is coming. So yeah, that's just an interesting one to think about. So realistically, this means that this is back for probably the entire run of the live action show for sure. So it's probably staying up for the next few years anyway, which, you know, is definitely positive. It's nice to have the show up on as many kind of streaming platforms as possible. I borderline was considering like not even mentioning this because, like, to me when I saw this, I was just like, okay, that's cool. And then like I look back like shortly later and like on Reddit and stuff like that, and it's like a big announcement. Like it's got like what, 900 comments, 32,000 upvotes. I'm like, oh, people really care about this. Like, okay, I guess much fewer people in the fandom than I thought had the DVD or Blu-ray sets, because that's just like my thing as a hardcore fan. Like as a collector, you know, I sort of assume that a lot of the people who my content kind of mainly reaches are kind of similar fans like me who, you know, collect some of the merchandise, would have like the show on DVD and stuff like that. But yeah, like I guess this is fine. A lot of people have Netflix, and this is going to be a benefit to people who just have that sort of by default, and they don't bother with collecting stuff on home video anymore. That's why this sort of stuff just blows straight by me, because, you know, I've had the DVDs since they first came out, and I have the Blu-ray now, and that's me covered. I don't have to worry about what streaming service it is or is not on. Don't have to worry about regions or anything like that. So you know, this is fine. Yeah, I wonder how much hype there is going to be on May 15th. That's potentially actually a good day for me to maybe do my commentary track for Boy in the Iceberg, with the show kind of launching on Netflix then. That's probably a good place to do 101. But anyway, that's just a cool thing. I doubt there's really going to be much of an event necessarily, but you know, in terms of news speculation, maybe some Dark Horse might want to time a comic announcement with that date. Probably won't. They always seem to let us down on those type of things, but it's always worth some speculation anyway. But yeah, the main piece of news here to talk about is this Instagram post from Bryan. Now, you may be asking, why are you just randomly talking about a Bryan Instagram post? Well, the thing here is that, like, this is, one, it's an Avatar post, and it's not just him being frustrated about people asking about, like, live-action show auditions. It's actually, like, part, like, information confirmation, and then part sort of update on the franchise, basically. So it's quite interesting, and I think that's why this one got a little bit of traction. But let's go through it here, and then we'll do some analysis on it. I appreciate everyone's interest, but it is not anywhere close to being true that there was supposed to be a fourth season of Avatar The Last Airbender, despite what you may have read on Twitter or elsewhere. Mike and I designed it to be 3 seasons from the very beginning, when we created it and pitched it to Nickelodeon in the spring of 2002. A beginning, middle, and end. That's it. This was the plan long before there was ever a movie, and the fact that the movie happened had no impact on us wrapping up the story in the way we wanted to. I wouldn't have had any interest in watering down and prolonging the story into an extraneous fourth season over a decade ago, and I don't have any interest in doing that now, nor will I in the future. But there will surely be more stories in the Avatarverse in a variety of media for many years to come. We're working on a big one now, and who knows what will follow. And if and when Mike and I ever get back to making more animation in this world, it will be the story we're most interested in telling, not the one everyone is yelling at us to make. That's how we made the original, for us first and foremost, and that's how the best art is made. Again, we greatly appreciate your interest and enthusiasm. Please be patient, and you can stop tagging us now. Thanks. Take care. Love, Bryan. So, a lot to sort of unpack there. He says a lot. It's his sort of borderline trademark at this point, kind of prickly kind of way of kind of being quite blunt, I suppose, in the way he talks about the fandom at times. Definitely parts of this feel reminiscent to the tone that was in his post about Korrasami just after Korra came to an end. Obviously, I was somewhat critical of the way he worded a lot of that post at the time. I thought Mike did a much better job in his post at actually wording it in a way and being a little bit more understanding of the situation, whereas Bryan went a little bit more on the antagonistic side of things. But anyway, that was like 6 years ago at this point. But anyway, so the first section of this is about these rumors. Fourth season of Avatar, this book 4, basically. Now, if you haven't heard this whole thing, I'll try and basically create a kind of condensed history of all of this. Basically, a few years ago, it's probably like 3-4 years ago at this point, you'd always hear these rumors come up in discussions about things of like, there was meant to be a book 4. Arnie has, in interviews with this place and this place, said that he wanted to make Zutara canon or something like that, and that Mike and Bryan forced Katang in season 3 so that couldn't happen in season 4, and all this other stuff. Basically, it's just these kind of rumors of what could have been in a theoretical book 4 before, as Bryan addresses here, before seemingly the movie got in the way and forced them to end the show with 3 seasons and not do a book 4. And apparently Arnie Has was always like, book 4 was always a thing. But then about a year or two ago, Arnie Has did come out in an AMA about the Dragon Prince, but he answered questions on Avatar and said directly when people asked him about those interviews, what are your thoughts on these interviews? And he said, those interviews never happened, that basically they were fake, they were completely made up. He didn't say any of those things, which basically just meant that, oh, this is just a bunch of Zutara fans making up information to add more sort of credibility to the idea that Zutara seemingly should have been canon. So that really helped to clear up a lot of things of like, okay, great, then there's basically no book 4 kind of evidence style stuff. But then like last year, like just over a year ago, I think it was April 1st actually last year, he posted a series of tweets about like his idea for if Azula had an arc similar to Zuko's and what they would have or could have done if they had a book 4. And again, in the same AMA, I think he still maintained that he always thought that there was going to be a book 4 of Avatar. And I think he still maintained that the movie was what got in the way of there being a book 4, and that Mike and Bryan chose to do the movie over doing a book 4. I think those are specifically the kind of points that were made about Arnie Has, which begins to bring up this whole idea of, I think, the gradual turning of the fandom's opinion on Arnie Has. A few years ago, it had always been like, I wouldn't say quite a 50-50 divide, but there was always a somewhat large section of the fan base who would always make the point of Avatar is what it is because of Arnie Has. It's nothing to do with Mike and Bryan, because look at what they did on their own in Korra without Arnie Has. They made a show that wasn't as good, and Arnie Has is the best. He brought everything together. He's the perfect head writer. That was always the idea from that section of the fan base. And now we're beginning to see like, wait, he's being slightly contradictory here in that, like, he's confirming, okay, these interviews with him were a fake, but he's still maintaining some of these core ideas about, like, book 4. And then here, blatantly, Bryan just flat out says there was never a book 4. Ever. It was always only ever 1, 2, and 3. Book 1, 2, and 3. And he's super clear about it. That he would not even have an interest ever in the past, back when book 4 could have been a thing, now or in the future even. He does not want to do another season of animation set immediately after book 3. And I think that says it all. That because the creators never wanted to do it, it was never officially a thing. So what on earth is Arnie Haas talking about? And I think the way I explained it to myself, I don't know if this is actually true, is probably just the contrast between probably the writer's room and Mike and Bryan being the showrunners. That they, in their minds, it was always just, it's the 3 seasons, book 4 is not going to be a thing. Versus the writer's room, which is probably thinking that, like, why don't we continue on? There's clearly potential for more story after this. What about these ideas for another season? Even though they weren't confirmed for another season, there likely was discussions between Arnie Haas and maybe some of the other writers about some ideas for if they would continue. And maybe they thought that, yeah, there's no way they're just going to leave it at 3. And I think that sort of stuff just maybe stuck in his mind. That he came up with a lot of ideas and he felt that there would be a book 4, but it never actually happened. And then the movie kind of idea comes up and he thinks that that's what gets in the way, when in fact it was never really the plan in the first place. Now, it speaks to sort of this lack of communication of, like, what's going on here? Why do they seem on completely different kind of planets with regards to their opinion on this thing? Very, very weird. It probably does speak a little bit to why Arnie Haas maybe wasn't even considered to be brought back for Korra, if this is kind of the way things are going. And then the other factor in this as well is that obviously the Dragon Prince has happened and we've sort of seen a show run by Arnie Haas, and that it's not this perfect show that is the be-all, end-all of animation. It is not as good as Avatar. It's not as good as Korra. It is good, but it has its own flaws as well. And it arguably has some kind of bigger flaws than either of those shows. And that's what I think is so interesting over the years, to see previous posts from people talking about Arnie Haas, and it being this split reaction, to now it being almost like 90% what is Arnie Haas talking about, and it's only like 10% what used to be a much bigger kind of part of the fandom of, like, Arnie Haas is the best ever. And obviously other stuff has happened that I don't think is even worth getting into here, that I think soured people's opinion on Arnie Haas. But either way, the idea here still remains that, like, where does this disconnect between 3 of your main creative people on the show come from? And like I said, I think it probably just is a case of the writers likely talked about stuff, whereas for Mike and Bryan, that conversation was never even in play whatsoever. And so my opinion, in the same way that, like, I've never really made, like, videos too much apart from covering some of these, like, rumors as they've happened, tweets and stuff like that as they've happened, well, I've never really made speculation videos on, like, what a book 4 could have been and so on, is purely because in my mind the comics are book 4. And I feel that's probably one of the things I've been most consistent on with my channel, is always giving and treating the comics as being just as important as the show. I don't particularly make much of a distinction between where material in Avatar comes from, because it's all part of the same universe in my mind, and that the comics are of high enough quality that to me they flow in perfectly with the show and they make up book 4. We don't need a book 4 in animation because we already have it in the comics. The Promise, The Search, The Rift, those 3, especially those first 3, which to me are some of the best comics, feel like a really, really great series of 3 comics that, in my mind, like, that is your book 3. That's your book 4. You cover your immediate plot after the end of the war. the Fire Nation colonies. You finally resolve the whole Ursa stuff, Zuko's mom, and you resolve in the Rift Toph's relationship with her father, and you leave room to still continue on. That feels very, very strong. So that's why I've never particularly been one of these fans who's been like, I can't believe they never did that book 4. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that, I don't have particularly strong feelings about the movie. I've always felt that I've been very fair with the movie in terms of being willing to talk about it, actually have a discussion about it, and not just dismiss it as being like, what movie? And those awful jokes that just get in the way of the movie ever being talked about as a thing. Like Bryan making this fairly serious point here about this should not be a rumor, I'm dispelling it right now. And then people's reaction is like, what about this line when he mentions the movie? Like, it just is blank. And it's like, please, people. It's been 10 years nearly, basically, with this thing about the movie. Like, can we please just acknowledge that as a part of the franchise and just move on? Like, this thing that you fundamentally don't care about, can we actually talk about it now? It's just the perfect example of a joke being absolutely beaten into the ground. So I like that Bryan at least, mentions it here. So yeah, that I think covers most of the book 4 thing. Like I said, there probably was some sense of, like, in terms of series Bible type stuff, like they had an idea if there was ongoing media about where those characters would go, but because season 4 was never in any way put into production, you can't ever say that there was a 4th season planned. And I think that's the important thing, because if there was a 4th season planned, we'd have seen some sort of concept art at some point, but we didn't. The Avatar art book doesn't have any, like, post-series concept art for, like, a potential book 4. Not like other series where it maybe was cancelled before it was completely over, where they did have stuff ready for other episodes before it got cancelled. That is not the case with Avatar. They did what they were doing, and they never got far enough into production on book 4 at all to have anything outside of just Arnie has saying that he had some ideas. That's what it feels like at this point. And I don't know, like, if it is just him trying to play off that kind of popularity that he had with the fan base of being able to, like, ooh, if I mention something new about Avatar, it'll bring the attention back on me or what. But, it's probably just an example of, like, Arnie has being slightly more open with the fan base than Bryan is. Like, it's interesting that Bryan's post here is one of the first times he's really just talked about the franchise in a while, versus, like, Arnie has in these, like, AMAs and stuff like that, is just perfectly willing to just mention all this stuff about production on Avatar and so on. It is a very different kind of perspective on both sides. The second half of this is, again, sort of, in my mind, like, the way I view this is like, okay, future of the franchise style stuff. Like, there will surely be more stories in the Avatarverse in a variety of media for many years to come. That basically is him just saying, there are comics, there are novels, and so on. That's where you'll be getting your stories. We have the live action show, that's the big one he's talking about coming up. And then, if and when Mike and I ever get back into animation, we're not going to tell the story that all the fans have been demanding. We're going to tell something new and completely different and interesting in the world that we want to tell. And this is where you get into the idea of, like, that may seem a little bit combative with the fan base, but it makes complete sense. To them, it's not, as artists and so on, as creators, it's not massively interesting just to, come back in and do a big animation project for a continuation. That may be exactly what the fan base wants, but them as artists, they will have to run the show, every aspect of it, and it's a huge process, which is why they've taken such a long break from animation, because Korra really did a number on them. That's why they announced breaks, both of them, almost immediately after the show came to an end, and why they very much want to come back and do something that they really, really want to do, and not just because the fan base wants it. So if we ever do get another season of animation, it would be something new. I think it would have completely new characters. It wouldn't be a continuation of Korra or Avatar. It'd be a different Avatar, or they'd take a different approach to the universe and focus on something different, or they'd set it in a very unique time or point in the universe where they could show the world in a different state and do different things. That's why Avatar and Korra are different enough. They're still the same universe, but that's why a good amount of time passes. That's why there's that 70-year time skip. I assume they would want to do something similar to that again. And they are very much acknowledging that they're aware that the fans want this extra stuff, which is why there are comics, which is why there are novels, which is where that stuff is going to go. And they insist on that. It's not like they just take a step back and don't care about that stuff. Mike and Bryan are both heavily involved in the other material as well. Obviously, Mike is directly the writer of the Korra comics, and we've seen all about the art direction that Bryan gives a lot of the comic artists on the specific way to do that. It feels, the way the post is written, it feels a little bit dismissive of maybe the other media in that it's just casually mentioned in a post, but he's involved with it. That's the point that's being made here. And yeah, the one thing you'd maybe say in all of this is that, look, can you please acknowledge that for a lot of fans, this live action show isn't the big one. This really isn't what they want. And I think that's the one thing that feels very weird about this post, is he's talking about the idea of we want to make something, original, new, how the best art is made. Yet, as far as we're aware, this live action show is just a retelling of the show you already made in animation. And while, yes, it's I suppose their first time being showrunners on a live action show, that's a new experience, it is still the same story they're going to have to tell, even if they are going to make changes to it. So, give us a reason to be excited about it, and don't just say it's the big one and that we're excited about it when you have nothing to say. But again, that's just my views on it, that I'm not particularly excited about the live action show, at all. But yeah, it is. The last sentence feels a bit okay, he's a bit frustrated with the fandom. We appreciate your interest and enthusiasm. Please be patient. Stop tagging us, and then immediately switches back to take care, love, Bryan. It's just that shift from we love the fans to stop tagging us, love. It's kind of funny in a way. Similarly with the whole idea of, just to mention it earlier on in the post, of stop yelling at us what you actually want. And it's okay, look, I don't know what post he's responding to necessarily there, but I probably get the impression people are probably tagging him all day, every day on Instagram with, tell this story in the comics. Tell this story in animation. Do a new season. Make some new episodes. And that's frustrating for him, and he felt the need to say this, given everything that was happening. Especially with the way the kind of dual section of the post is dispelling Book 4 rumors and then talking about their approach to the future. I get the impression there probably was maybe a sudden influx of a lot of people maybe finding out about the rumors about the Book 4 thing, and so he felt the need to be where's all this coming from that people are Book 4, we stopped it from happening because the movie happened, where's this coming from? And he doesn't want that out there, and that's why he made this post. And I can understand that a lot of that stuff is perfectly fine for fan discussion amongst ourselves, but you shouldn't really be directing that at the creators themselves. They know the fans want content. They do know, as much as at times it feels like the way the content is coming out on all aspects, it feels like they're not listening at all. They get the fan base. They know what stories we want, and that's why we are getting books and why we are getting comics. Saying obvious things do this. They know what you guys want. So I understand that frustration. So yeah, that's been the video. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. Avatar, Netflix again, and also Bryan's post here. What are your thoughts on these pieces of news? But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.